Here we go.
Hi, sir. Thank you for coming. Two things. Would you please comment on lobbyists, special interests, and who really owns Congress? And second, do you think that corporations are people?
People. No, people make up corporations, but corporations aren't people. About lobbyists and how the special interests work. It's easy to want to pass a law and say no more lobbying in Congress. I don't endorse that position, but let me explain it. Because the what if you want to petition the Congress for pro-gun legislation or pro-life legislation or something else? Petitioning is in the First Amendment. You have the right and responsibility to petition. The problem is the lobbyists who come and lobby for special favors are lobbying for something that is unconstitutional. So to me, the solution has to be not to prohibit lobbying per se or petitioning. The solution has to be to have the right people in Washington that do not yield to the pressure. Take this power away from government to pass out so much favor. I mean, they control too much wealth. They control everything. So therefore, it is a natural thing for those in the special interest, to come and see what they can get. But a lot of corporations and people who come that are being abused by the government come and they want relief. They come, but they're in the same category. But it is obscene when you think about, and I already mentioned about how the drug companies and the insurance company really write the legislation. FDA, the drug companies write those regulations. The bank lobbyists, they write the banking regulations. So they're very bad. It's not good for us at all. But we have to, of course, it would never be a problem if you had only people in Congress that would resist all that. But because government has so much to pass out, the temptation is very, very great. So people who yield to it, I mean, we need to get them out of office. We need to reduce the power of the government so they can't pass out so many favors. But it is very symbolic of the trouble. But I think it is legitimate. One thing that is very annoying is as you see some members of Congress going through, and I think there's a rule that says after a year that you can start lobbying, but that really doesn't stop them. They have ways of getting around it. Sometimes I think it's a farm team up there for lobbying, because I tell you what, you go through Congress and you get a position and you get credibility. Lobbyists have way too much power because of this, and they get paid a lot more than members of Congress do. I say, well, they write more laws than we do too, tragically.
My name's Carl, and thank you for coming. It's nice to hear a plain voice. My question is, with the future reductions that are coming in discretionary funding and the obvious trimming that we'll have to do in Social Security or social programs, making it more efficient, would you favor higher deductions for charitable contributions? Through charity.
If we don't change the tax code where, either very flat out or a sales tax and we have deductions, oh yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, any under the current system, I will vote for any tax credit or tax reduction, even though sometimes it distorts things because somebody gets it for here and not for over here. But for charitable contribution, and because we argue that we want charity to pick up the pieces, if government's going to do less, I mean, this would be a good option. But the best option is getting rid of the income tax and letting you make your own money.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of executive orders that have been written and kind of ruling from the presidency. What is a way that you can go ahead and get rid of those executive orders? Will you do what it takes? I know you're against writing executive orders, but will you do that in order to reverse
the executive order problem? This is an example of the executive branch doing things that they're not allowed to do under the Constitution. They're writing laws. Some of those executive orders are legal. If you're the commander-in-chief and you want to move troops, if I want to send out an order to bring the troops home from Australia, post haste, yeah, that's a legitimate executive order. But I am convinced that it would be right and proper for a president to repeal executive orders, and maybe it could be done in a blanket form. Repealing all those executive orders. proper constitutional government. Regulations are unconstitutional. Regulations are laws. Boy, wouldn't that handicap the IRS? They couldn't. Of course, that doesn't matter. Nobody can understand them. Even the IRS can't understand the regulations. But no, they don't have the regulations are laws, and Congress is responsible for the mess because they write laws in general and they allow the regulatory agencies to get out of control. Many times the regulations are written way over and above the original intent, but the Congress does nothing. They just let it go. So executive orders, signing statements, I think are wrong. If they send the bill over and the bill is 90% reasonable but 10% bad, and the temptation is I'm not going to follow the 10%, that's not good law. I say repeal the bill.
My name's Delbert from Preston Island. Thank you for coming. My concerns are, ever since Abraham Lincoln, we have not had a Congress in this country. It's been dead. It's been corporatized. Is there any way you can comment on turning that around?
Okay, I heard a little bit, but not the full thing. Since Lincoln, we did what?
The Congress died in Abraham Lincoln's day when the South departed on a journey. We've been a corporate Congress ever since.
Well,
Turn that around.
Well, we can only turn around if you get the right people there that understand the Constitution, obey the Constitution, and you could turn it around because it's the Congress's fault. They have the authority to do it. Congress could write a law this week and repeal the Federal Reserve Act. So, if they wanted to, but 5 years ago there was no support. We're getting more support from that now. No, Congress has, they can turn it around and they have the authority to do it. It's that they've been derelict in their duty and there's too many people who like big government. And they're not only on one side of the aisle, they're across the aisle, both sides.
Hi, Dr. Paul. I'm Jeff Lickey from Dubuque. Thanks for coming to see us. My question is, what can you do as president to affect the courts? The Commerce Clause, the General Welfare Clause, and the Necessary Proper Clause have been turned on their heads, way away from original intent. What can you do?
Well, you can't do that overnight because you would ask those precise questions on any appointment to the Supreme Court. But there would be some things you could encourage the Congress to do, which I've tried to do, and that is pass legislation requiring a majority vote to remove the jurisdiction from the Supreme Court of some very important issue. For instance, I happen to be pro-life, and I think states should have a lot more to say rather than the federal government passing a national law through the courts. But if you pass a law and say that jurisdiction is removed, and you want something in the state of Iowa, whether it's education or medical care or on the abortion issue of guns, you could pass that and we could deny the jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. Those laws would have to stand. Ordinarily, I think the founders assumed that the Supreme Court wouldn't be hearing everything and then writing law into their findings. So that would be the important piece of legislation to pass. So the president would have to, influence the Congress on that. But the only authority as president I would have is to make certain that the appointees to the Supreme Court knew and understood those issues.
Bureaucrats and federal employees, has any ever been fired?
Anybody ever fired a bureaucrat? I think it's very difficult. I mean, they have a pretty strong protective union, I imagine they have been. I can't tell you when or so. I mean, sometimes it gets so bad maybe they have to, but it is very, very difficult.
SEC didn't investigate some things and so forth.
Yeah, then they would be, the higher up you get in government, you aren't, if you're an elected official or appointed official like judges and all, there's a way of impeaching people, but that doesn't happen very often.
As you know, the U.S. Postal Service is costing the U.S. millions of dollars a year, most of which is coming out of taxpayers' dollars. Right. How would you deal with this dilemma?
You ask about the post office, as usual, they're losing a lot of money, and they're losing more this year, as usual. The Constitution gives the authority to have a United States Post Office. But we legalize competition in the delivery of package. So we have UPS and we have, what's the other one? FedEx competing, which means that we have the services available. So I wouldn't think that the best way to do would be to, just close shop on the post office. But I would legalize, I would encourage the Congress to pass a law. It would be constitutional to allow individuals to deliver mail. I don't think they ever thought that they were writing something in there to make it an absolute government monopoly. And it would do one of two things. Either the government would throw in the towel because they were found not to be necessary, or they would improve their services. But I think the best thing to do would be to legalize the competition. Matter of fact, legalizing competition is a great thing. In education, I want to make sure there's always competition. I don't like public education per se when it's run by the federal government. I don't like the Department of Education, but I want to protect homeschooling and private schooling. I want to protect your right to opt out of a medical system so that you can have private health care and buy your own insurance. In monetary affairs, I want, instead of closing the Fed down in one day, I would legalize the use of a competing currency, gold and silver. And you could do that with the post office too, just legalize the competition.
I work for the post office. Congress made the law that we had to pre-fund retirees' health care. And that's what the problem is. If we didn't have that burden, we would be the most profitable country.
So that comes out of the post office funds.
We're supported by our own revenues, and not by taxpayers.
Okay, so you're saying the biggest debt comes from the retirement?
Congress made the law that we have to pre-fund our retirees.
Well, they don't do it for themselves. That doesn't seem fair. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But without that mandate that Congress put on us,
Well,
we would be
who would take care of the health care then?
Well, we're pre-funding it. If we just funded it for those that are retiring now, instead of into the future, we would be.
Well, in a way,
shape.
that's what Social Security and Medicare are supposed to do. We're theoretically pre-funding it, but they always cheat and they always use up the money.
That money probably isn't there. It's probably been spent anyway.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Where?
Yeah, I'm Ron from Anamosa. Thank you for coming. I hear the rumor that my dollar and my employer's dollar that we put in Social Security, I know some of it we get back, but was that loaned out and that never come back?
Yeah, it's gone. But I was describing a way to try to fulfill that contract. I think it was a flawed policy, from the beginning. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't work and try to work it out, because the money was taken. It was spent overseas. It was spent in these wars. It goes into the general revenues. But the Social Security has, they have a sheet of paper that says that the general revenue owes them these umpteen billions of dollars. So it looks like you have money there. But where's the Treasury going to get the money? They either have to borrow it, print it, or tax people. But the money is not there. And I have a bill in that would have prevented that. That meant that the Social Security the fund could not be used for anything else. It would be put into a fund, and it would be into a negotiable security, which is different than just a promise to pay by the federal government, and they use it up. So the money isn't there, and it's a real mess. But
crime.
It'll get much worse if we don't do what I'm suggesting, cut the spending and make sure that we do our best to take care of the people. Because in a way, we tell the people, you're paying into it, and you're going to get it back, and this is your money. So that was the government's promise. But too often, governments make promises and they break them. I think that's one of the things that we're really derelict in on the promises to our military veterans. I mean, just think of how many injuries and problems, and I hear so many difficulties of them getting proper care. We have hundreds of thousands right now applying for help that have come out of the Middle East. They have, organic brain disease, a syndrome, and they have post-traumatic stress syndrome and head injuries, and they're not easily identifiable. After Vietnam, it was the Agent Orange problem, that it was hard to get treatment for them, and also the Persian Gulf War syndrome. I think you'll see a lot more of those diseases where they have to hide them and shove them aside. So I think that's where we're really derelict, because, but it's this way in general. You take highway funds. You know, if we were trying to work toward a more sensible system, you know, a user fee isn't the worst thing in the world, and we're taxed for our highways. We pay a gasoline tax. Well, that wouldn't be too bad if there's enough revenue there, take care of our highways. But they use that money up, then they go back, and then it becomes a political football in Washington that you have to play games. And they say, oh, we need some more money. We need money back in the district to build our highways. You took our money. Then you have to play games, because then it becomes political. If the chairman of the committees get more money than the rest, and then if somebody asks for them, then they go through this argument, well, that's an earmark. We're not going to have earmarks. But the user fee would be a good one. I have a coastal district, and we have a lot of ports and a intracoastal canal. And they pay fees to run their boats up and down there. And that's supposed to take care of it, but they won't allow us to have access to those funds. So you have to go beg and plead to get the appropriation. So it really, you know, puts me in a box, because I don't vote for the new appropriations, and yet they deserve the money. I don't want to add to the debt. I just want them to live up and be honest and tell the truth and finance the way they were told us they were going to do it. Thank you very much.